The Timeshift.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Timeshift. This week reviewing the latest episode of Doctor Who titled The Story and the Engine. And we kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the story, the writing and tangentially related matters. Now, to continue a theme that was brought up towards the end of this episode, let's just review this episode in just 6 words. A strong idea and fine execution. Emphasis on the word fine there, because I will be honest, I think the core concept of this one, of having an entire episode centered around such a mundane location with a horror twist on it, is far better than the actual execution of that idea, for reasons I'll discuss as this review goes along. I will certainly say, as far as the episode's favour is concerned, I think that this is a fine bottle episode. For those who don't know what I mean when I say bottle episode, typically, this is something you'll get in a lot of television programs, particularly science fiction programs, where it's an episode that is centered around one specific location. It's centered around the TARDIS, or the Starship Enterprise in Star Trek. Maybe the entire ship, maybe just one specific area of it, and then the Doctor, or Captain Picard, or whomever, has to solve whatever problem is in that location. In this particular episode, we're not in the TARDIS, we're now in a barber shop in Lagos. And you know what? The fact that this is a bottle episode that is not centered around the TARDIS is something that I'm really thankful for, because I started to feel after a certain point those episodes were getting rather self-indulgent. I like the location, and I like the character that he ends up bringing to the episode itself, and how it's written and put together. There's a sense of authenticity here that is really something I do dig, and something I really do love, and it's something that I do kind of wish we got a little bit more of a sense of in a lot of other episodes of Doctor Who. The sense of this is a story that the writer themselves definitely wanted to share. This is an aspect of maybe their culture, or where they're from in the world, or where their family's from in the world, and they're bringing it into this setting. They're bringing it into a science fiction setting, and I really do love that element of it. And maybe that's the case, maybe that isn't the case, maybe they just did a crap load of research to make it feel this way, but either way, love the core idea of this. Like I say, I love that part of it. I love the idea of having a mundane location that has the horror elements around it. It's how it was all wrapped together, which I don't think really lands for me, I'm afraid to say. Don't get me wrong, there are some really cool elements in this episode. I like how they have the mural on the window, which changes and it becomes animated as people tell their stories. I thought that was a neat element of it. I just wish that they didn't do the flashback footage when the Doctor was telling the story about Belinda, because for a moment I thought, oh crap, this is going to be a clip show episode, which, I mean, it kind of became towards the end of the episode, because, the Doctor Who's been around for a very long time. Here's all the old Doctors, time to wheel them out again. For what feels like the 122nd time at this point. God, but hey, this is kind of the first time we're probably doing something like this in the Russell T Davies Mark II era, so maybe to people who are fresh to the show, it might have a little bit more of an impact, but someone who's kind of, who definitely has been watching this series now in its current incarnation for the past 20 years, yeah, I'm getting a little bit tired of it, but still, neat moment that. Like I say, the mural thing is neat, the live action stuff notwithstanding. I think that, actually, speaking of the stories, the story that the Doctor told of Belinda trying to save that old woman's life, I thought that was really touching. I thought it was very well put together. I thought that Gatwa delivered that story very well. I like a lot of the visual stuff in this episode. I love the design of the spider, which when I saw the trailers thought, oh look, Sutek's back, but now he's a giant spider monster, and he's probably destroying time and reality, because now he'll become even more powerful, and that's going to be the big threat they have to deal with in the final episodes of this particular season. Maybe not, we'll soon see, but he definitely isn't a spider, we can establish that. As I say, there's very different smaller elements of this episode I do like, but the problem for me is I don't think it quite hangs together, because I feel that the story just ends up overcomplicating itself. Like I say, the idea of being in a very mundane, very everyday location with this horror twist to it, I love that being a concept in horror stories. What is this? This is a story where people are just going to their barber and just doing what they would do otherwise. Telling stories. Oh sure, maybe not quite the same kind of stories that these guys are forced to tell, but you know, just talking about how your day's going, talking about how things are going, talking about the shocking display in the most recent sports match. Just everyday stuff, but oh, you need to keep doing that, because if you don't do that, then everyone's going to die. Keep talking and no one explodes, basically. And that's a cool idea, and having this strange, enigmatic, mysterious barber that's forcing people to do it, and just having that visual image of the two lights behind the guys on the bench that flicks red if it's good, green if it's good, red if it's bad. I love that, but it feels like visual images that are without consequence. Like, at no point is it ever really established what happens if someone tells a crap story. I mean, there is the clip, there is the bit that's in the episode as well as in all the trailers where the Doctor and all the others were getting sucked out into space, and I thought that that would be the consequence. You'd have a moment where someone would just get so tired or just so worn out from having to tell these stories that they'd tell a story and whatever is judging the story would not find it interesting, and off they go, sucked out into space to get killed and then eaten by the giant spider monster. And that's how we learn about there being this giant spider monster thing. Oh, that'd be cool, that'd be great. And it sets up a level of stakes. And then maybe as the episode goes along, each of these people has to sacrifice himself to buy more time for the Doctor, or something along those lines. You can get the emotional moment where the barber has to sacrifice himself so that the Doctor gets that extra little bit of time to figure out whatever the problem is, so they can defeat the storyteller and save the day. And that's ultimately not where the episode went, because there wasn't really much in the way of consequences for what happens if we don't tell a good story. I mean, if they don't tell a good story, then the ship just doesn't move. Okay, sure, I mean, yes, it's a bitch for the storyteller and whatever her name is, the demigod lady, but the only people that are going to lose out on this in practical terms are the poor sods trapped inside of it. They're going to just starve to death, but then they could just bring some more people in. That's all they really needed to do here. Like, the episode itself, strong idea, but it's stuff like that that does take away from it. And like I say, it does overcomplicate itself as it goes from just this barber who is doing this for mysterious reasons to feed this thing, to feed this entity, to being actually, I am all these gods of mystery and storytelling, but I'm actually not. And actually, I'm the guy that writes the stories for all of them. Oh, but actually, I'm a guy that's built an entire universe for the gods to live in. But actually, I'm kind of also not, but also I am, because these gods existed before me, but also they're incredibly reliant on me, and now I want to overthrow the gods, and in order to overthrow the gods, I've built a giant spider robot, and the giant spider robot's fueled by stories, and now this giant spider robot has to walk to somewhere to then destroy the thing, but also maybe not destroy the thing, but just cut the gods off at the source or something. Like, I know that I am kind of doing the over-the-complication thing for the sake of comedy, but at the same time, it does feel as though it keeps just adding an extra element into it. And at a certain point, it's adding a new element, undoing that new element, then adding a new element, then undoing that element, and just doing that almost 3 times on the bounce to the point it ends up feeling like, okay, so what the hell is the actual point here? Why is this guy really doing this stuff? What are the consequences if we don't do this? Because in the end, the consequences of all of this is... Because it's not as though there was some kind of ticking clock element here, because the reason why the ship exploded in the end is because the Doctor fed it so many stories that it blew up. And the robot monster itself is just a spaceship. It's not like it was forcing people to do it on its behalf. It's something that the storyteller guy just created in part of his very complicated, very convoluted plot of revenge. Like I say, I do like the episode as a whole entity, end to end. And even if we take the whole thing of subverted expectations, me thinking we're going to get a very different story from the one we ended up getting, I still think it's a good episode. But it's ultimately let down by the fact that at the heart of it, there's just certain elements of it that just don't really land, because it doesn't do what all good horror and all good science fiction stories do, which is properly establish the rules. what are the consequences if someone tells a bad story? Yes, in the context of Doctor Who, I am really sick and tired, particularly of modern Doctor Who, and I'm counting this as modern Doctor Who from the past 20 years, not the most recent or whatever you may be thinking. A big problem that I've always had with it is introducing characters just for the sake of a kill count, just so that you have characters to be off like it's some kind of slasher movie, and that's something I really do detest. But at the end of the day, with an episode like this, it feels as though there needs to be some kind of consequence here, for in the event our heroes don't tell a compelling enough story, have people get killed, have people get blasted out into space. Because that opening bit where they're telling the story and you got the lights behind them flickering and there's the look of panic and terror on those guys' faces was brilliant, and had the entire episode have that level of tension in it from start to finish. This would be one of my favourite episodes this season, and possibly one of my most favourite episodes thus far this decade, if it was able to maintain that level of tension and that level of horror and that level of just being on the edge of your seats. But it isn't there. And this isn't just a simple thing of the modern incarnation of the Doctor being a little bit too cheeky and a little bit too knowing, a little bit too charismatic. It's the fact that there really is no consequence here in the immediate term for telling a crap story. There is no thing of, oh, this guy, he told a story about an inspiring moment in their life, but it maybe wasn't as interesting as what they thought it was, and now, like I say, blasted out into space, or they get turned to ash, or something. That's not what we end up getting here, and that is a shame, because I think, again, within this episode, and this is something I'll discuss, and when we get into the performances, I think this has all the elements, all the aspects of a great episode of Doctor Who, but at the end of the day, it's let down by the fact that there's just so much waffling, and so much standing around and talking and shouting at one another. And there is some, there's some great stuff. The whole thing of why the hair braid things exist, and about how slaves would use them to hide maps in it. I love learning about that. I genuinely love learning about. And then you have the bit where the Doctor and Belinda then go out to around the back of this shop, and you have them walking into the maze. But I love the visual image of that. I just wish it would have been bigger. Like, you pull back and it ends up becoming this giant, massive thing. It starts with all the different pathways. It starts up like a big brain or something like that. That would be great. And that would play into the visual imagery of storytelling and where stories come from. So then when you go into the thing, oh Christ, I just remember the jump scare moment. Oh God. No, wait, we'll remain positive. That just maze stuff. Expand it out. Yes, you're going to have to use a crap load of CG to expand it out, but sure, that's fine. It's just basic geometric shapes. Then the whole thing of them going to the back of the shop and you have all these shelves with all these artifacts and books and bits of technology. Great, I love that. It's a little bit on the cheap side, but still, I love it. It helps build the idea that this storyteller guy has been around for centuries, and they've just been building all this archive of just stuff that they can rely on so they can just feed this story engine. And I like the image of this story engine thing being this brain, but it opens up like a flower, but then it forms into the shape of a tree, and at the heart of it is the thing that is a mixture of plant life and machine and wood and flesh. Visually brilliant how that again opens up like a flower and you just get this mass of swirling light. Brilliant, I love that. And I love the moment towards the end of the episode where the Doctor's pleading with the storyteller to take a second chance to be the person you've always been. I love that stuff, because it definitely feels like the moment of the Doctor trying to plead with the bad guy is something that we haven't seen in a very long time. We might have seen it more recently, but by God, it feels like a long time since we've seen it in quite this quality. But as I say, it's an episode that is let down by the fact that at the heart of it, it doesn't quite connect to the tissue. It doesn't make that thread between really brilliant idea and what happens if this doesn't work? What happens if we tell a bad story? What are the consequences? Because it doesn't really build up the tension here, not to a sufficient degree. Like it was a case of just seeing some people getting offed here and there, or even just seeing it in the intro sequence, what happens if someone fails. That would be okay with me. that would really be okay with me, but it feels like a case of just standing around and waiting for the Doctor to solve stuff rather than it being an active threat, which is regrettable for me. Because otherwise, like I say, this is, I'll save that for the overview. Well, now, actually, no, there's a couple of things I will just point out, and these are things I really didn't like. And I really didn't like a lot of the dubbing stuff that they did off camera, a lot of the ADR stuff, which it felt rather out of place. With regards to the bit where you have that Doctor and Belinda in the hospital, and like I said, I love that sequence. I really did. It really hit home for me. I loved it. But it's this very awkward dubbing coming from the Doctor, and I think also the paramedic, where it's just like, yes, you see, the problem is that she's not like, honestly, I don't remember all the medical stuff, but you get the idea. It just kind of sounded off, and the direction of it just sounded like, really, we had to get this guy in a recording booth after the fact because we realised that no one said anything during the scene or it was too quiet to hear it. The ADR stuff didn't work for me in that sequence at all, which is a shame, but hey, that's something I'm going to pick up that other people aren't. The other thing was, towards the end of the episode, where you got the guys that are now, they've been saved, they're now gonna run away, and you just get the off-camera bit where one of the guys goes, "I'm gonna go meet my wife and child." It's not like it's just, oh my god, it's just it's an awkwardly written line with just a very awkwardly put together. Again, it feels like a case of, oh, we really needed something else here, just wrap it up with them being happy and they're happy to be released and they're going to see their family. But what do we do? What do we have them say? I'm happy that I can now go see my wife and family! Anyway, we'll move on to the performances now. And I always hate doing performances in an episode like this because I think it's the case that everyone did pretty much everything they needed to. I think that Ncuti Gatwa did very well with this episode, despite the fact it felt as though he wasn't quite as utilised as he really should be, but for a general common or garden variety Doctor Who episode performance, he did it very well. I think that Vada, I'd watched a video the other day telling how to pronounce it, but I forgot because there was that episode last week which didn't feature in it at all. But anyway, I think that Vada Sethu as Belinda Carlisle did... Belinda Chandra, sorry. Belinda Carlisle's the singer, good God. I was always... Whatever, that's a joke for another time. I think that she did okay, but it did feel like a very generically written companion performance. Like, it kind of feels as though that maybe when this episode was written, the person writing it thought... Okay, so they probably talked to Russell T Davies like, okay, so what's the idea with the companion? Is there anything I should know about their character? They're travelling with the Doctor, reluctantly, but I can't say anything more because of spoilers. So the writer's there like, Doctor, Belinda, Doctor, when do I get to go home? And that's it, and everything else of the character just didn't build up much of a muchness. There is one shot in the episode which I might discuss at a later point, because I think that the way that it was put together might have been hinting with something with her, but beyond that, oh god, I can't pronounce anyone else's names. Let's just say that, let's refer to them as their character. Out of respect, to refer to them out of the character, because I don't want to spend the rest of the episode getting people's names wrong. I think the guy that played the storyteller, or is it written in the credits, the barber, I think he did a really great job. I just think that much like Gatwa, it's a case of they weren't quite given enough to really sink their teeth into it. When they're doing this big speech about how they were all these different gods and all these different people, that feels as though it's building up to something fantastic. Maybe had they not done all the bits where you had the animated stuff over them, it would have worked better because you would have got a lot more of the actors' just performance, a lot more of the physicality of it. But maybe they realise, oh crap, we can't have this guy cutting all the hair away, otherwise we've got nothing to really work with. Aside from that, I think they did very well. I think that the woman who played Abner, they were okay, but again, it's another case of they needed a little bit more material to really play into that. I mean, the cameo appearance with the Fugitive Doctor, great, really great. But I'm not going to criticise Zebra, because he didn't have much to do, but it feels as though someone who was briefly with and briefly met the Doctor in a previous life now being bitter that the fact they didn't go on the adventures with them. I think that's something you could really build a lot more with, but I think that's a fault of the writing, not so with the performance. The rest of the extended cast did well, but again, it's a lacking within the text itself, not the performances. And that's the issue with the episode itself, is that whilst I do think that it's a great episode in and of itself, well, a good episode in it, I don't think it's a great episode, I think it's a good episode. I think that it does. Actually, no. Let's get into the overview. Where I can say this a lot more clearly. I think this is a good episode of Doctor Who. I think that regrettably, given the direction this series has gone and this season's gone in thus far, it was probably one of the lower rated ones as far as my own personal enjoyment is concerned. But even beyond that, I still think it is good in and of itself. I just think that it's an episode that could have been better. Had it had that same level of tension that we saw towards the start of it, all the way through it, my god, we'd have been eating good. But aside from that, it is decent. But I think it's let down by the fact that the core story behind this, the stuff with the gods and stories, are a little bit too convoluted for my liking. And it doesn't feel as though the cast, be that Gatwa, be that with Sethu, or the additional characters introduced in this episode, aren't really given enough to really give them something to work with here. Which is a shame, because this is an episode that I really do enjoy. I really do enjoy the episode in and of itself, but couldn't be better. With that said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, reading comments from the previous video. Lucky day! We're going to keep this short because the warm weather's starting to get to me, so apologies, I don't read out the comments quite in full. But we kick off with a double-barrel set of comments from Crowbat Man, I am the Knight. The first comment says is that humanity is really good at eating up lies and blocking out truths. This is them talking about how, in the review of the previous episode, I talked about how it was kind of odd, and it's this just been recurring criticism for modern Doctor Who, is that you'd have these massive alien invasions happening in London and wherever, and then people just go back to their everyday lives. And they talked about how it wouldn't be too difficult for some group or another to alter the facts of what happened, just say, oh, it wasn't aliens, it was a terrorist attack, or oh, the alien spaceship was just faked in with CGI by some prankster, and really it was just some tragic accident. Like, you think about the episode where the spaceship crashes into the Tower of Westminster back in the first season of modern Doctor Who. They probably just kind of turned around and said, oh, it was just a plane crash. That's all it was. It was an experimental plane, like a Zeppelin kind of thing, and it just crashed into it. Okay. I understand their point of view, I understand what they're saying, and it probably is one of those elements where that unit or some other organisation is scrubbing the metadata to make sure that no one puts two and two together and realises, oh crap, aliens are everywhere! They also then talk about how, during the episode itself, it mentions about how Conrad, this is of course the villain from the previous episode, is making lots of money with this podcast stuff, so them having this fancy studio isn't beyond the realms of possibility that they could have just rented it out for the sake of lying to Ruby. Maybe they do all this stuff within their bedroom over Skype, what have you, but for the sake of building up this impression for Ruby, they end up renting out this space, which I think is an interesting angle to go with it, but still, there's this part of me that can't help but feel that, I don't know, there's something about it that doesn't quite work. Like, either this was just a guy that just did fairly modest, fairly weak, paranormal podcast thing, and this was their big break, and that's the moment where they revealed themselves to be this colossal arsehole, or maybe, I don't know. There's something about it that doesn't quite work, but at the same time, I'm not going to hold that against the episode too much, because I still think it was a very good episode. And finally, last but by no means least, we have Big X1 who said, I like the twist, and I didn't mind the ending too much, because at least it tries to build the big storyline for the season. Thank you for your comment, and I really don't remember how the previous episode ended right now, but still, I liked last week's episode quite a lot. I loved it, and I have enjoyed seeing some of the commentary online that some people have had for it. I haven't seen a video, but I've seen a video that has a title along the lines of, Is Lucky Day the New Love and Monsters? I don't like doing this kind of stuff, but I'll just say, if you think that last week's episode was on par with Love and Monsters, you're a fucking imbecile. I'm sorry, but you really are. If you think the episode was as bad as that, for fuck's sake, seriously, fuck off. Well, in any case, let me know what you thought about this week's episode, whether you loved it, whether you hated it. Let me know in the comment section below, and you may be read out in a future video, depending on timing and such. Anyway, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!